Jamie Hand and I produced the documentary From the Marsh back in 2019. We did over 6 hours of interviews with some of the best decoy carvers in the country and boiled it down to less than 30 minutes. We put away the footage that we didn't use, and even at that time I knew we had some real treasure tucked away, and that bothered me. What we would like to do now is to present footage from those first interviews, which were taken in the shops of the carvers amid their tools and paints. We hope that you will find it worthwhile to listen to the wit and wisdom of one carver at a time.
Grayson Chesser of the Eastern Shore of Virginia has lived a full life, or as he would say, this world doesn't owe me anything. For years, he and his wife Dawn ran a successful waterfowl guiding business on the marshes and bays that his family has gunned for over 300 years. In addition, Grayson is one of the best-known decoy makers in the United States who learned his craft by watching and listening to many of the long-gone masters on the Eastern Shore. He is the best storyteller that I have ever met, and anyone who has had the pleasure of visiting with him knows what I'm talking about. Sit back and enjoy the wisdom of this decoy maker, waterfowl guide, farmer, and politician.
Well, when I was a kid, I always liked art, and I just always gravitated to it. I liked making things out of clay. I liked, drawing and things like that. And of course, my father was a big hunter. Now, he was a coon hunter and a quail hunter. Not so much duck hunting. When he was a boy, he did a lot of duck hunting with my grandfather on Waltz Island. Mostly gunning at night for black ducks with overbait with live decoy. And so I grew up with those stories, Instead of hearing about the three bears, I heard about, Crip, my grandfather's live decoy that loved to hunt like a dog. And and about Dan and Nancy and Junk Bill, my father's coon dogs. I mean, they were the stories I grew up with, when I was a little boy. And, when I was coming along, most of my friends in school a big portion of them hunted. And so I started getting interested in it a little bit. And of course, I'd always been interested in it because of these hunting stories. And but I decided I wanted to duck hunt. Well, duck hunting is not, you just don't go out with your gun. I guess you can, but really, it's a lot more involved than that. So I kept bugging my father. My father was a game warden at the time, and the state had a 42-foot boat called a John D. West that they kept in Watchbrig. And the fellow who was the captain of her, Milton Dougherty, he would have to stay with her all the time, make sure somebody didn't burn her or mess with her when they'd go out and look for duck traps and things like that and stay for 3 or 4 days. And so my father called him and asked him if it'd be all right if I came along. And being a game warden then was a lot different than it is now. Now it's a lot more like a state trooper. Not entirely, but it's closer than what it was then. Then you pretty well did what you wanted. And so they said, sure, bring him along. And when they went out, Milton Dougherty carried me out on a point on Rebels Island with about 3 life cushions to sit on, and had 3 decoys. One of them was a black duck that's up there on the shelf, and one was a hog out decoy with a replaced head, probably Ike Phillips' body, and the other one was a paper mache with the bill shot off. And so I sat there, and I can remember some guys came by in a outboard. They were looking over at me, and I could see them laughing. And anyway, an old squaw hen swam up, and I had a 28 gauge 1148 Remington. I mean, I took a bead on her just as if she was a tiger. I killed her, and boy, you talk about tickle. And then a little later, a goldeneye hen swam in, and I killed her. And I was just like somebody took the first hit of crack. I mean, I was hooked. And, you know, it was the two things that I really loved, you know, art and hunting, you know, they both just went together. And I think that's one of the reasons that I loved it so much, because, you know, with other kinds of hunting, like quail hunting, you know, you got the dog work and all, and that's great, and it's beautiful. And deer hunting, you know, that has its own appeal, and rabbit hunting and coon hunting, all the things you do with hounds. I mean, it's nothing prettier than listening to a pack of hounds running. But this was art and hunting together. And, you know, if you look back at it, you know, a lot of, well, the first art was basically sporting art in a way, because it was the cave paintings that the cave, you know, early men were using to depict the animals they hunted and their experiences, and the two things just, I mean, they went together, you know, like unbelievably. And I mean, I was just hooked from the get-go. And the next year I started, you know, trying to make my own decoys, and you know, they were awful. But
how old were you here?
I think I started hunting the 59-60 season, I believe, because I believe that's when it was. Because I know I'd been hunting at least a couple of years. The first time I went on Assawoman Island with my father, looked for duck traps, and we landed at the north end of the island and walked the whole way down, and that was before the '62 storm. And I know I'd been hunting for a couple of years then, because I mean, every hit of every gut, every pond, you know, just black ducks getting up. And I thought, oh my God, I've died and gone to heaven. And I told my father, I said, Pa, this is where we need to be hunting. And he said, well, I know the guy who owns it. He said, I'll talk to him. And so he did, and we started hunting out there, and hunted out there till, you know, the federal government bought it. And of course it's far different now, you know. I mean, all the ponds that I hunted are way, way, way in the ocean, because it's moving like a freight train, you know. The island to the north of it, Wallops, where you have all the infrastructure for trained Navy guys use Aegis systems, and you know, you have rocket launches. You know, they've hardened the shoreline up there. Well, the current goes northeast, southwest along the shore. So if you stop it from washing here, anything down below you washes twice as fast, because it has nothing coming from above to replenish it. And you know, of course now Wallops sticks way out, and you know, we'll become more vulnerable as time goes on, because it's, you know, you can't, just like Nathan Cobb said when he came in, he sailed in Oyster Harbor when they were having the sail saw off the contents of the hotel, and they asked him if he had a comment, and he said, yeah, so you can't fight the ocean, and you can't. when I started making decoys, there weren't any decoy books really. The only book was Eugene Connet's duck decoys, and just been trying to. I was just getting involved in it a little bit, and a cousin of mine, him and his family went up to New England, and we went with them. Well, I saw the brochure for Shelburne Museum, and oh, man, I want to go. So we went, and I went in there, and it was an elderly lady. Her name was Marsh, and she probably hadn't seen anybody for 2 weeks. Nobody was interested in decoys in 60, 61, 62, something like that. And so, she could tell how interested I was, and she took me on a tour that you'd have to call everybody that you ever knew to, she said, well, we're not supposed to go back here, but you come on with me, I'm going to show you this. And I think that might have been when I got the Connet's book, and also got the little book, the Shelburne Museum book, and it was, and well, this guy's from the Eastern Shore, and this guy's from the Eastern Shore. I was looking through them, and I just got really interested, and then I met Miles Hancock, and I mean, he was almost like another grandfather to me, and he was real influential, helping me get started. I always tell people, I say, it might be men who were better carvers than Miles Hancock, but it wasn't no carvers who were a better man. And I mean, he was just such a good man. I mean, he was a good Christian man. He'd been around her in his early days, but he didn't talk religion, but his life was his testimony, the way he treated people. And I mean, it wasn't just me he was good to. He was good to a lot of people. It helped a lot of people. But you talk about a man who knew birds and knew hunting. I mean, he started when he was, I think, 12 or 13, market hunting. And, he came up hard. He was an orphan, pretty much. Well, his father basically gave him to somebody, which is what you did back then. If you lost your wife, you couldn't take care of the kid. You gave him somebody, and the people that he gave him to, I think, provided for all his needs, and probably as good as what other kids that time had. But I think he still had it hard. He had to work from the time he was old enough, and only went to school for about, probably, I doubt he went to school a year. He learned how to count shooting marbles. And but he was influential on me in a lot of ways. I mean, he taught me more about how to live than he did about how to carve. Not that he didn't teach me a lot about how to carve, but I learned from looking at the old birds, because I was immediately drawn to them, and started collecting decoys. I don't know. As soon as I started hunting, I started collecting decoys, because I was fascinated by them, and nobody was collecting decoys, and and So a lot of different things I think influenced me, but what I try to do, there's probably nobody who influenced me more than Nathan Cobb. Now, not so much the painting part, because his paint jobs are very, very simple. But if you look at them, they're very, very correct too. His Goose Brant, the paint jobs they look like Goose and Brant. His Black Ducks, a little feathering on the head, and all that type of stuff. But the thing about him is, his decoys had so much motion, or I'll put it this way, they had the illusion of motion, and that's what makes them look so alive. And I mean, when you look at one of his Brant, if you've looked at Brant, you can tell exactly what that Brant was doing. Maybe he's picking a piece of eelgrass that's floating on tide, the way his head is, or maybe he's hissing at another Brant that's gotten too close to him. And with all those, and it's that way with all the things he did. He was able to do that because he used Yaupon limbs, and you get all these different curves, natural curves that you just can't get with a regular piece of wood. But he could do it because he used these Yaupon limbs. Now, and that's what I try to do, and because you can't make a real bird, but you have to create the illusion of it being a real bird. And and I always liked impressionistic paintings, and Dave Watson, Umbrella Watson. I mean, the first time I saw one of his Black Ducks, I thought, whoa. It was on, Marsh, Hancock had attached to his shop, it was, one part was a garage where he kept, like, I don't know, she probably about a 1950 Chevrolet pickup, something like that. And up on he had a shelf there where he'd have decoys sometimes, and there was this Black Duck up there, and I thought, oh my Lord, look at the head on that thing. And then once I finally saw stuff his that was in original paint, I said, whoa. Because a lot of his stuff he painted using a bird feather, like the flight feather from a bird, probably a shore bird because it's pretty small. But you can do it easy. You can do it with like a dove flight feather, and I mean you can make a line that looks like you cut it with a scalpel, and that holds his paint as good as any paintbrush you'll ever get, and that's what he used. Because Miller Jones, who lived next to him, said he used to use bird feathers to paint with. I thought, bird feathers, and then finally, understood what he was talking about, and he kept live birds to use to paint by. Nathan Cobb had live birds. He had, Brant and geese, that were live decoys, and so they were with them all the time. And the Ward brothers, I learned a lot from looking at their paint jobs. Oliver Lawson's too, and learned a lot from Cigar. Just a lot of people, influenced me. What inspires me is the things that I see when I'm hunting, mostly. I mean, I watch birds all the time. I'm fascinated by them. There's not a day when I don't go by the ponds here on the farm and impoundments and look and see what's in there and see what they're doing and watch them. And so really, I think that probably inspires me more than anything. sometimes it's something somebody else did, you see, you know, and think, oh my Lord, look at that. And, but, you know, to me, you're always trying to capture the essence of the bird or the spirit of the bird. And that's what you're after. And, you know, you always fall short, but that's your goal. And, you know, you have to get that. You can't get so hung up on detail, because if you get so hung up on detail, you know, we don't process things like a camera does. You know, when I'm looking at you or you, Jamie, you know, I see your face, but everything else is a little bit of a blur, you know. And that's the way it is when we look at a decoy or a bird. And you know, but if you have something that is so ultra realistic and so detailed that everything is just perfect, it's like you look at it and your eye gets hung up on this detail and you don't see the whole thing. And so I think it's really kind of a self-defeating thing. And that, like when I started carving, was, you know, the decorative, not long after that, the decorative movement started, you know, the real detailed stuff. And I'm thankful I never went down that route, because, you know, the goal is to make a bird exactly like a bird. And the better everybody gets, the closer they get together, and the less individuality it is. My goal is to make what I see in my mind's eye. And, you know, that's different than what you see with a camera or what you see if you're looking at something like this. It's like looking at a forest. You know, you don't see the forest if all you're focused on is one little tree. And so that's what I've always tried to do. But, you know, and I've always been so tied to the hunting tradition, because that's what I grew up with. That's what all my family were, you know, that's what they were into. You know, I had uncles that made decoys, great uncles, and other relatives that made decoys. Some were really good, but, you know, a lot were just really mediocre, but they served a purpose. And so that's what I've always tried to do is, you know, you want to pay homage to the birds and to the hunting tradition. It's I mean, hunting means a lot to me. I don't know where I'd be without it, to tell you the honest goodness truth. You know, I farmed for a while, and I liked farming, but I never loved farming like I did hunting. And you know, I've made most of my life in some way associated with hunting and carving, and to me the two things are inseparable. Now, with some people they are, you know, they separate them, but to me they're not. Well, this is a song I wrote about my cousin Johnny. We were riding on the back of a trailer with two of my older cousins, and we were going down and get pump water out of the branch for sweet potato beds. And Johnny and I were about 4 or 5, and we were holding on to the, you know, huge barrels. I mean, they stood by the stalls, so we were holding on like this. And my cousin Buddy, who was driving tractor, we did drive out like a bat out of hell. And right where Jimmy Biden lives, you know, that bad turn, we were going around that because we filled up at the branch down there. And Buddy struck a bump and water splashed in Johnny's face, and he let go, and off the back of the trailer he went, struck the hard surface of the road and busted his head. So I wrote this song about it called Johnny Ain't Right. My cousin Johnny busted his head, he fell off the trailer, I thought he was dead. Lay stretched out on the cold hard ground, but he shut off the tractor and we all gathered round. Well, there was blood on his head, there was blood on the ground, and he bled some more as we stood looking down. Well, Clarence got scared and Buddy did too. We threw up our hands high, what we gonna do? What we gonna do, Lord, what we gonna do? We ran around hollering, what we gonna do? Well, we tossed him on the trailer and we drove him home. He was out so cold he didn't even moan. We drug him in the house and we threw him into bed. Big Ma looked him over and this is what she said. Johnny ain't dead, no Johnny ain't dead. Poor little bugger's got a busted head, but praise the Lord, Johnny ain't dead. She said, children, don't take alarm. His head's so hard it won't do no harm. But sometimes I wonder, late at night, if that ain't the reason Johnny ain't right. 'Cause Johnny ain't right, no Johnny ain't right. Poor old Johnny ain't ever been right. Saw him today, what a pitiful sight. One eye looked left and the other looked right. Big old dent in the front of his head. But we're just thankful Johnny ain't dead. But Johnny ain't right, no Johnny ain't right. Poor old Johnny won't ever be right.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
Well,
don't let it go to your head.
I told him.
Don't let it go to your head like it went to Johnny's head. Yeah.
I got my granddaughters to sing it, and they can sing. I mean, those two girls can sing. You know, they get rocking out. Boy, Johnny ain't right, no Johnny ain't right. Well, we went to the Shrink Dick Carnival, and Johnny was there with his granddaughter, and I said, come on, girls, I want you to sing Johnny Ain't Right for Johnny. And those, no, Pa, no. And I said, no, come on, sing. He said, no, no. And Johnny was saying, come on, girls, I want you to hear you sing it. No, no. And so, I don't know, Johnny went and get a hot dog or some french fries or something. And I said, why wouldn't you girls sing Johnny Ain't Right for Johnny? He said, Pa, I can't believe you asked us to do that. That hurt his feelings. I said, no, it wouldn't. He ain't right.
You get a kick out of it. That's great.
When did you write that song?
I don't know, a couple of years ago. You know, you sitting around carving. You got, sometimes, depends on what you're doing. Some things you have to think about. Some things are just like muscle memory once you do it enough. It's like riding a bicycle. First time you get on might be complicated, but after a while you don't even know what you're doing. And it's the same way with carving. So you have time to think about, you know, all kinds of deep thoughts. And so that's when I wrote Johnny Ain't Right. I had a little duck. I mean, she was looking right at me too, boy. His name was Tiny Tim. I put him in the tub to see if he could swim. Down, down, down. I pushed poor Timmy down. Drown, drown, drown. Drown, Timmy, drown. And her eyes were getting this, like this big around, you know. She didn't know what was being said, but she knew something was happening. And then I said, but when I pulled him up, Timmy took a gulp of air. We'll eat no duck tonight. Life just isn't fair. My mama said to me, you simple little cluck, your dad has done and told you, you just can't drown the duck. and my daughter said, Mother, what kind of book did you buy for my child? She's going to be scarred for life. But if you could see those little eyes getting bigger and bigger, when I said, down, 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 and then, but you know, also, you could just see the relief when I said, but when I pulled him up, Timmy took a gulp of air. Well, you know, as far as passing this on, when I started, it was like the absolute low point. You had guys from the World War I generation that were left, but there were very few carvers from the World War II generation, because most of those guys, at the time in life when most guys started carving, they were in the war, and when they got back, they were playing catch up, and so there weren't many guys from that, like my father's generation, but there were still plenty of guys from World War One generation, the Wards were still alive. Miles Hancock was alive. A lot of guys, and they were tickled to death to see a kid that was interested. They were thrilled to death. And so Lloyd Tyler, I used to go visit all of them, and all those guys helped me so much. Sometimes it would just be a little thing, but it would be something that would really help you. Cigar Daisy was the youngest one of that group. He was, just too young to serve in the war, but still he was started World War II generation, kind of. And they all could not have been nicer to me, come and eat, and I know sometimes they didn't feel like fooling with a kid, but they all did. And, so I always felt like if there's, and how can I repay them? I did anything I could for them. But really, to me, the way you repay them is by passing that knowledge on. And, why would you want to keep any knowledge? When you're dead, you're dead. And why would you want to hold on to some little technique that you figured out that maybe nobody else has, although there's very few things that somebody else hasn't figured out, if you just ain't finding the guy who figured it out yet. But and so I can't tell you how much it's meant to me to be able to pass what little bit I knew on to other people. And when you're teaching somebody, like a lot of the older artists, the way you learn was by copying other artists. Well, that's kind of the way you do when you're carving, unless you are an absolute, genius like I've never seen. Because when you're doing that, you're learning techniques, and you may be copying somebody's work, but you're learning the techniques that he used to put into it. And the techniques are like your tools. They don't mean that you're going to be a great carver. You can have all the technique in the world. I've seen several guys that had technique that was unbelievable, but yet they just couldn't put it together. But when you teach somebody to carve, you teach them those techniques, and in the beginning their stuff will look like yours, but then they'll start branching off and doing their own thing, if they're good enough. And even if they're not, even if they don't have that ability, they can still enjoy it. If somebody copies my work, I look at that as a compliment, because I was complimenting the guys whose work I copied, and it tickles me to death to see how well Cameron's work has progressed. He is amazing. Some of the stuff he does.
How old was he when he came to visit you first time?
I think first decoy show I ever did to sell was over Shinkatig, and I met him then. Now, I'd done the Virginia Beach show when they first started it, but I was just exhibiting old decoys. But he was there, and I sold his dad some decoys, and his dad and Henry Fleckenstein came over here after the show, and I had some teal bodies that I'd sawed out that weren't that great, and I wasn't going to use them, some heads, and so I gave them to him, and then he started coming up here in the summers. He'd stay a week, 10 days, something like that, and he was just eat up with it. You could tell he didn't like it when I'd take a nap, man. You know, he'd come in the house and ask Don, where's Grayson? Is he up yet? And I mean, he was gung ho. And from the time I met him, he always said as soon as I can, I'm moving to the Eastern Shore and I'm going to make my living as a decoy carver. Well, you know, that's pretty much what he's done. Of course, he's branched out into more, artistic stuff. It's not that a decoy can't be really artistic. I mean, a good decoy can stand with any art. But you're constrained if you're making a decoy because, or at least I am, because I want to make it a good decoy too. Well, if you're making it a good decoy, sometimes you can't do things that might make it a better piece of art. You got to think about how it's going to float and things like that, which you don't have to think about if you're just doing something that's just a piece of art. But and you know, I've taught for the community college down here. I taught carving there. I've been involved in the Master's and Apprentice program with the Virginia Folk Life people, and the last time that I did it, I told them, I said, I want to do it different than what I did it the first time. I said, this time I want the guys who've guided with me, and that was P.G. Ross, Andy Dutton, Drew Sturgis, and Mark Ross, and all of them had done more carving than Drew. Drew had they're good. You know, they didn't really need me that much, but anyway, I wanted to include them in it. But Drew, he'd done less because he's a lot younger. I think he's about 28 now. So I spent much more time with him. But when he was starting, it was like, oh, it was painful to watch because you wanted to do it so much, and it was like a struggle. And Drew has to learn by watching you do it. You can't say, well, Drew's in the book. He can read it, but he has to see you do it. And I think, oh my God, not good. It's going to be rough. But when he got done, man, they were nice. I mean, he made a rig of buffalo heads that, they looked a lot like mine because that's what he was copying. And I was, helping him. But let me tell you, they were good. And then he made his mother a swan, a reaching swan out of a cedar limb. Made his dad a reaching goose out of a cedar limb. Most people, when they start carving, the carving comes easier to them, I think, than the painting does. But with me, I guess because I liked painting when I was a kid, the painting came easier. And he's that way. The painting comes easier to him than the carving does. And he can do a good paint job. He's, and I think he'll
Stopping to see me and keep working.
Well, there's a camaraderie about it that's very positive.
Oh, I think it is too. You have some people who are kind of off to themselves and who really, I don't think are comfortable with sharing stuff, but by and large, most of the people in the carving world, if they think you're sincere and you really want to learn, they're willing to help you. And it's just like I said about muscle memory. When we did the book back in the 80s on carving, one of the hardest things for me to do was think about what I was doing, because, you know, like something I would do to the bill, and the fellow who did the book with me, Curtis Badger, would say, "Now, what are you doing now?" Or "Why are you doing that?" And I have to stop and think, well, why am I doing that? Because probably the last time I thought about that was 8 years ago. You know, when you really stopped and thought about, now, how am I going to do this? Well, you did it this way, it worked, looked good, so you did that way, and you done it that way so much, it was like, you know, pumping that bicycle. So certain things you have to think about, other things you don't, because it's just that muscle memory. You've done it so much, and that you don't have to think about it.
The muscle memory is what allows them to talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the talk. About when somebody comes to visit you. You know, how does it work? You're working on something, somebody comes in and interrupts you.
Well, you know, they're not really interrupting me, because, like I said, I can carve and paint and talk at the same time, because it's like walking. You know, you can walk and talk at the same time, and you know, you do something like this enough, it doesn't bother you, and you know, most hunters are pretty good storytellers. Most carvers are good storytellers, and let me tell you, I will put up with most anything as long as somebody's a good storyteller. I've had friends who were as no count as you could ever imagine, but if they were a good storyteller, I would put up with them. And because especially my father's family, oh man, they were all good storytellers. I couldn't wait for hog killing when they'd all get together, and you know, the oral history would be passed down, and you know, and I tell you, that's something our society is losing, because you may think you're communicating on the internet, on Facebook and all these other things, but you're not communicating at the same level you are when you're sitting in front of somebody and you're looking at each other eye to eye, because a whole lot of communication is facial expression, the look in somebody's eyes, their body posture, the tone of their voice, and you can put LOL for laugh out loud all you want to on your Facebook post, or your little frowny face or your little smiley face. It ain't the same thing, and it's nowhere close, and in a lot of ways it's dehumanizing, in my opinion.
You're pretty far out in the backwoods here. Do you still get people to come visit you?
Well, yeah, people do make the pilgrimage to the center of the universe.
That's right.
Because there's a guy named Richard Audrey, I believe his name was, who wrote this book trying to explain, you know, I think it was a playwright, but he was really interested in anthropology. And he wrote this book called The Hunting Hypothesis, about how man became man as we know him, because we were apes that were slow, couldn't see good, didn't have big fangs, didn't have big claws, and you know, but hunted. And his hypothesis was that we developed the big brain and communication skills and tool using and all these things because we were such sorry little critters to be hunting. But in that book he talks about man, the irrational animal, and he said, consider this. He said, no matter who the person is, no matter whether he's the richest guy in the world, President of the United States, king, or whether he's a guy on the street corner with a tin cup. They all think the universe revolves around them. They think that they are the center of the universe. And you know what? You think about that, that is the truth.
Okay. Now,
By the way, if you ever need a gangster name, Thomas
yeah, Thomas
Thomas
Paine.
Paine.
Yeah.
You got a lot of Thomas Paine.
Well, thank you.
Give him that again on air. Tell him, what should his name be?
Yeah, I was telling Cameron, I give my gunning parties, I call them Indian names, Native American names. Mud Boy, Teal Slayer, non-huntingest white man that ever lived. If you had a name, I'd call you Common Sense.
Well,
That's a good nickname for you. You got a lot of Thomas Paine in you.
I'm very happy because, you know, Indians could change their names according to events. And when I used to travel with Bud Ward and there was another friend of mine, Marsh Roethlisberger, and Ronnie McGrath would travel with sometimes, they called me Chief Take a Nap. So,
That's great. You got another in you.
yeah, I'm glad that's over with.
Yeah. That's Common Sense, that's a little more aristocratic.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
You used to be shy and retired?
Kind of, you know, and but my wife, bless her heart, you know, puts you at the door. You know, you got to do this, and really, she's probably shyer than I am, but she's not shy when it comes to pushing me. And you know, I used to tell people, I said, yeah, we do like the lions do. I said, she starts to chase. I said, when it comes in time to make the final sale or kill, I said, that's when I pounce.
What part of your work gives you the greatest satisfaction?
That was it.
I don't know what part of my work gives me the greatest satisfaction, to tell you the truth. I mean, it's pretty awesome when you take a group of decoys you've made and you put them out on the water, and all of a sudden you see birds lock right up and come into them. I mean, that is hard to beat. It's you know, I can't deny that it's not pretty satisfying too when people hand you money for something that you did that you enjoyed doing, and you know, and it's obvious that they appreciate it too, and it's also really, really satisfying when you pass on the knowledge that you've gained to somebody else. I don't know of any part of it really that doesn't have something that's very satisfying about it. The whole thing, really. It's I mean, it's been a good life, real good. It's nothing in the world worse than spending a day in a duck blind with somebody you don't like. And so if it was somebody I didn't like, you know, they just didn't come back. And you know, and I shot with my parties. And I told the guys that guided with me, I said, treat these people just like they're your best friend who doesn't get to hunt very much, just like you would treat them. Now, if that's not good enough for them, you know, they go someplace else. Because a lot of people don't like the guy I'd shoot, you know. But they weren't paying me enough for me not to hunt. I mean, the reason I was doing this is so I could get enough money so I could hunt, you know, and survive and hunt. And, you know, I wasn't doing it, you know, just to make money. I was doing it so I could hunt, and because I loved it that much. And you know, the people I carried, oh God, they were so good, you know. But you need a jerk every once in a while. Not too often, maybe once every 2 or 3 years, to make you appreciate all the good people. You know.
When I had to teach, I had to be there 7:30, and I loved teaching.
Right.
I had no problems with it, but I had to be there at these times and these places.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be anywhere except where you choose to be.
Well, the little restaurant we're going over to over on Sykes, when I go in there, you know, some of the guys over there retired. One of them was a police officer, one of them was a Marine police officer, and, you know, some of them are watermen. And when I come in, they said, look at him, he ain't never had a job in his life. I said, you don't understand. I said, my job is being me. I said, and I have to do it 365 days a year. I said, and I don't get any holidays, I don't get Christmas off. I said, and I don't have any retirement plan. I said, and I got to do it whether I want to or not. And you know.
Have you enjoyed being your own master?
I think it would kill me if I wasn't. I think I would just shrivel up and die.
Like E.T.
When I got elected to the board of supervisors, the people who supported me, you know, they were all tickled to death, and all I could think of was, here I am, the age I am, and I've never had a boss except my wife since I left my parents. I said, and all of a sudden, with the flip of a switch, I got 3,000 of them. But I basically did what I thought was right and let the chips fall where they may. So it wasn't anywhere near as bad as what I thought it would be. That's in the hunt club.
Yeah.
And my oldest granddaughter, she was sitting there when she was about 6. And she looked up at that and said, Pa, that mermaid doesn't have a bra. And I said, well, actually, there's a story about that mermaid. I said, that's your grandmommy. I said, but I changed the hair color so nobody knew who it was. She said, well, Pa, grandmommy doesn't have a bra. I said, well, back then grandmommy didn't need a bra. And she said, well, Pa, you need to put some shells on grandmommy like Ariel has. So there's a place I used to hunt called Roman Rock, and I'll just see if I can remember all of it. I don't know. Pa carved a mermaid on the hunt club wall, swimming in the ocean, no bra at all. I thought she looked familiar, so I asked my pa. He said, it ain't a mermaid, it's your own grandma. 'Cause my grandmommy was a mermaid girl, swam in the ocean all over the world, till she stayed north 1 year or too long, playing her and singing her mermaid song. Well, it started to rain and it started to freeze. Foot-long icicles hung from the trees when Pa started his boat that day and headed south towards Kickitank Bay. Well, when Pa first saw her, it was a terrible shock. She was sitting shivering on Roman Rock. He said, Lord, when he recovered from his shock and fright, he said, Lord of mercy, what a lovely sight. He said, I'm going to catch her, and I know I can, 'cause I'm a hunting and a trapping man. He checked the wind, he checked the tide, he saw they were all on his side. He drifted up behind her, and he grabbed her by the tail. She commenced to thrash, and she started to wail. Well, he tied her up tight in his hunting coat and sailed her home in his gunning boat. For the whole first year, she ate sardines, she wouldn't eat pork, and she wouldn't eat beans. He taught her how to talk like the people do, and her tail disappeared and her pretty legs grew. He taught her how to hug and he taught her how to kiss. He didn't know love could be like this. He bought her some pretty store-bought clothes, and this is all a secret and nobody knows, 'cause my grandmommy was a mermaid girl, swam in the ocean all over the world.
Wonderful.
The youngest one said, "Pa, was Grandmommy really a mermaid?" And I said, "Well, you know, Pa's older. He gets confused, but I think she was."